Hi, everybody. I'm here. It's just me, myself, and I today. And I'm really glad to see people are already in the chat. And I'm about 30 seconds early. But, Mike, I've been trying to get things all arranged. And we got a lot of information to go through today. I'm glad Gina's here because she knows all about this stuff. Um, what I'm going to talk about is I've been holding back. I didn't do 9 candles going up to the summer solstice because I was basically told I didn't need to do it. It's kind of where it is, and there wasn't anything to be gained by me putting time and effort into that. And I'm really glad I didn't because then I got really sick and because of a biopsy that went bad, and I had to fight that off. So this week I'm feeling fine. I really am feeling great. I think that whatever these astrologic clouds that have been blowing over me are blowing away. So I'm really, really happy about that. And I just took control of my own health and said, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Started a new diet, which is working very well. It's really helping me sleep, really helping me feel a lot better. So that's kind of where I am, and I hope y'all are. But I was like going through, watching a lot of readers, reading a lot of stuff. Gina that I was talking about, if it's Gina M, I think it is. She and I we did a 6 month reading and 3 month reading, 3 months, 6 month reading, and we she lives in Scotland where there are lots of ley lines. Britain's full of people. They have ley line clubs. They have people who go out and measure them and watch them. So if you're going to say to me, where do you get all this information about earth energies and ley lines? Where's it coming from? It's coming from groups like that, where people take a line and they monitor it. Some of these people have been monitoring these lines 10 years and longer. And it comes out of the work done by a guy named Rory Duff, which we're going to get to later in this show. But it starts with where the world is today. And right now, we are in a 7 year, and so we're going to do the numerology of that. Means that 2023, when you add all the numerology, all the numbers together, equals 7. And so you say, okay, I'm a 7 year. What's that do for me? Well, the number 1 is your pioneering. Number 2 is getting together with people. Number 3 is working with groups. Number 4 is building a base. Number 5 is chaos or change, depending on how well you've worked with the other elements. Number 6 is hearth and home and getting settled. And that was last year, coming out of COVID and deciding what we really wanted to work with, what we wanted to work on, and who we were. But number 7 is spirit and also data and intellect and thinking things through. And when you're in universal number 7, you want to get quiet, go kind of into your own mind and your own self, and focus on what's really important to you. And what's going to happen in the 7 years when you're trying to do that, you're going to have tower card after tower card after tower card thrown at you. And it's going to, and you're going to say, well, that's not calming and soothing. But 7 is where we learn to truly trust, and we go to our higher spirits about things. We stop chasing the dream and surrender to the reality. And that doesn't. And the thing is, a lot of times we're chasing a dream when if we just slowed down long enough, the reality is so much better than what we were rushing to. You just surrender to your greater good, and you deserve it. And that's what we really deserve right now. Is to get to that. So, in honor of thinking about that, I ran into the 7 year is a year when we surrender, and I kind of knew that from the beginning of the year. And I'm like, surrender to what and what's going on, and da 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 da. Anyway, I decided that after I looked at that, I'd lay out, because we're going to go back to my tree. We're going to go back to Hogarth. We're going to go back to the fairies. If you saw the flyer, the thing I threw out as the flyer to come to the show, I love that. That's a metal sculpture of a, a dandelion head with the fairies going up the steps. I love that. And yeah, the fairies and the elves and the gnomes and Cecil and all the rest of them are going to be back in here too. So I decided, since I was going to be doing that, that I would get us over to, I'd use a different deck of cards than I normally read from. This deck is called the Fey Tarot. And if you are not a native English speaker, it has texts in Spanish, English, German, I think. Yep, that's German. Anyway, the little handbook's in several different languages, if that would help you. And I just said, okay, what's the energy of right now? What are we going to learn about in this session? This is a reading for this particular show. And we've got the Ace of Cups, the Devil, and then I absolutely love this card. This is the Ten of Swords. And it's not a Ten of Swords like I've ever seen before, but it really explains the Ten of Swords. The Ten of Swords means the end and ultimate dissolution of whatever's been going on. So it says we're right on the cusp. And you're going to hear a lot about this in what I talk about today. If we open our hearts, we can really begin to see the change and have all sorts of good stuff come into it. But what gets in the way? Our own egos, the devil, the thing that tells us, nope, you can't have that. I'm not allowing that now. But he's dying. This element about within each of us is dying. And it's just dissipating, just like this poor little fairy who was the Ten of Swords guy. He's dissolving. He's literally melting into the floor, or kind of scattering into the floor. So that's what I want you to think about, because that is in all of the people I began to follow in the last week or so about the change we're going to go through. Now, I knew solstices are always a big change. That's why I've done 9 candles up to them, so we could work out our intentions. But what I didn't realize, and you have to take several different disciplines put together to understand this. But the first person I ever heard talk about earth energies was a guy named Rory Duff. And basically he pointed out that if you think about it, the world's like a big crystal, which totally appealed to me because I work with crystals. But there's a web of energy, and in the way it's illustrated in this one, it's above the atmosphere. But the ley lines and the earth energy lines are actually in the earth. And there's a bit of a timeline to this, so I hope you'll let me indulge you if you haven't heard it before. In 2017, there was a place in the universe that our whole solar system was in, and it shielded us from a lot of the subatomic particles, the neutrinos, and the very little bitty things that I can remember. The first time I ever heard about neutrinos was in the 70s. And in order to, they're so tiny that the particles pass through the earth, and they're so hard to find. They were theoretical phenomena. They thought they were there. They were signs over there, but they had to trap some to find them. And the only way they could find neutrinos was they would build these very elaborate sort of nets in the earth to find them in caves. And they set up all this elaborate equipment, and they'd capture, because of where they were, they'd maybe capture 3 or 4. They're bombarding us all the time. But because the Earth's so big, they'd only catch 2 or 3 at a time. And I remember watching a thing on 60 Minutes about this big lab that was tracking them down. Now, you watch shows like that when your husband's a physicist. Trust me, you do. And so he was explaining it all to me, and he said, they're teeny tiny, they're really hard to catch, they're theoretical, which means no one really knows if they're there. But if they are there, then they have tremendous ability to disrupt us because they don't even stay on our planet. They just pass right through it. Well, in 2017, there was a bunch of geologists looking for something to go on because every 12 to 13,000 years, they would find massive amounts of disruption in the stones they were looking at. And they'd find it at certain levels, and no one had a rational explanation for it. And of course, no one was here to record it to see if anything happened, but they really had a lot of trouble finding it. And that's the first thing I ever heard Rory Duff talk about it, and he's as a geobiologist. And I'll put his name and his stuff up along the bottom in case you want to look him up. Anyway, he said that they started looking around, and in 2017, the astrophysicists started telling everybody some cloud we've had protecting us from the neutrinos and the tiny little particles that come when stars explode. It just explodes across the universe, and we had this thing shielding us from that kind of activity. But in 2017, it'd be sort of like our magnetic field that blocks the sun's radiation, that stops us from burning up and looking like Mars. It went away. And it went away in 17 and 18. And by 18, they were seeing clear paths to what these subatomic particles are doing to the stones, and they became aware. This is something the Earth goes through every so many cycles, every so many thousands of years, and we're in it now. And so I've done a show on this before, and one of the things that they found out was, so now Rory knows, and the astrophysicists know. Well, when you have certain kinds of cancer treatments, they're working on your DNA. They're working at such a small level. And so the scientists that were tracking this, cancer scientists, all of a sudden started seeing changes that they weren't directing, that were not where they expected them to be. But of course, they're seeing them because they look at everything. And they became aware that some other mechanism was at hand here. So not only that was the first thing that approached in my mind. If those subatomic particles can pass through rocks and change them, what's happening when they're passing through us? And they talked about it in some articles. And this is when people talk about our DNA being upgraded. That's what they're talking about. It's triggering off because we only use, I think it's about 10% of the material that's in our DNA do we actually use that we know what we use it for. And it seems to be necessary. Well, now places that didn't seem to be necessary are getting fired up. So that I started following Rory because of that. Now, Rory is a fascinating man. He's done some incredible research. He's got people all over the world following energy lines, following ley lines. They're working on defining what all of them are. These are all kind of, they're new in that they're new to a lot of the information Westerners have. They're not new. Native Americans have known about Earth energy lines, and that's a part of their life story. They're what we used to call their mythology, but it's their life story. There also a lot of it recorded in other ancient literatures. So anyway, Rory does that kind of stuff. He works with Earth energies, and we're really being altered by cosmic energies, and there's not like anything you can do about it, guys. I mean, it's happening, and it's apparently somewhat benevolent. But if you followed my 9 candles, the ones I've done up to equinoxes and solstices, the reasons that those happen, what happens at the equinox and the solstice 4 times a year, 2 equinoxes, 2 solstices, the ley lines, because these people watch them so carefully, they get straight and they all kind of pull together, and they did what they called harmonized. And so Rory Duff and his people started following that much more closely. And when they got into that, they they found out that in following them, especially, they followed them really closely at those times when they got straight. And it's like the earth gets all aligned 4 times a year. And then they started finding that there were breaks in ley lines. The energy from ley lines is fed from interplanetary star systems that were around when they got set up. And there are people who I've had a man on named Johann von Wick. He goes and he reconnects them. He fixes ley lines. He gets them all back in line. And I asked him, why are you doing that? And he said, because somewhere between 2024 and 2026, the massive energy that's entering our planet, the amount of cosmic energy that's going through the Earth's core, is going to fire the core up to a point where the core rings. And I don't mean rings like bong, 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 but it sends out energy waves, and it's going to go out across the Earth, and everything needs to be tight as a little drum, as it were. And so I went, okay. So we start with cosmic energies that are affecting us. And now we feel those changes. And a lot of people do. They say their ascension, they say they're enlightening. How are we getting changed? That's kind of a mystery. And that's the third part of this presentation. I'm talking to you about the stuff we can measure. By the way, to measure the energy that's in ley lines, which were defined in England in the early 1900s. And the way they found them in England is the energy in this lines is very real. And it connected, there's ley lines that go across England that connect cathedrals one to the other, or holy places, and places like that. And when you started going around the rest of the world and finding out where the ley lines were, in Australia, they're called singing lines because the Aboriginal people never lost their understanding of the fact they were there. Why they're there, or what they could do, they didn't know, but they knew that their faith said they needed to sing to them. The Maori in New Zealand and in the South Pacific, they have always believed that those ley lines, and they have vortices and portals that are created around them, and they know which stars they're connected to. That's an active part of their faith. They've never lost touch with this. We're the slow guys. We're just beginning to catch up with it. And they open your heart. They open the energy of your heart. There's another place, and I didn't put it in my notes to give you their names, but there's a thing called heart math, and I'll type it out so that you know what I'm saying. Heart math is on YouTube. And if you've never gone there, go there and get ready to spend an afternoon looking at stuff you didn't think you ever needed to really know about. But it's about how the energy flows through our bodies. And they've done a lot of research about the electronic energy around people. Like, you'd think because our brains work that way that that'd be a very important point. Well, actually, the energy field around your body is much wider around your heart. And one of the other things I'd known for a long time was when they started doing open heart surgery, or even replacing people's hearts, doing all that stuff, a lot of the people came out different. Now, sometimes they assumed some of the characteristics of the heart that they had assumed. Other times, I had a friend whose dad had a heart transplant, and they told my dad he had to talk to a therapist, psychological therapist before, and to get ready for after. And then they would warn the families that at that point they didn't know exactly why, but moving parts around in the heart actually changed people's temperament. Didn't make them nuts, just made them different. And what they found out is there's a ganglia that is on the heart that actually responds to things you think are coming out of your brain. And it's, when you say you just felt it in your gut, well, you didn't feel it in your gut, you felt it in your heart. And it was all down in this part of the body. It wasn't in the head. Our head reacts much more slowly than our heart does. And there's a whole lot of really interesting understandings of dealing with those parts of our heart and our own physiology, and all that's getting hopefully upgraded in this change of nature that we're going through right now, the cosmic inflow. And once you get past heart math, then you have to learn enough about astrology to learn where the galactic center is. Because just like the sun sends out waves to us of energy and things we need to survive, the galactic center does too. And right now we're lined up much more closely with it than we have been in a long time. So we're getting energy from there too. And we don't have a little cloud that used to kind of keep it away if we didn't want it. So it's kind of like we're coming out of a dream that's got a whole lot of physics in it, which is my idea of coming out of a nightmare. But anyway. And then what can you do about it? Well, it's all energy at the end of the day. And so is meditation. So you can look to some meditation to calm you down and bring you in, because that's kind of where we are. And I have bannered for you. No, I put in the description. If you go into the description below, there's a whole interview with Rory Duff and Heather Unsworth. And I'm going to tell you right now, I find what he talks about fascinating. So I don't have a lot of trouble following Rory Duff. But when I was sending Danny a bunch of tapes about the information Rory Duff had about crystals and energy and how the world worked, he wrote me back and said, no more British guys sitting on a couch talking. He couldn't take another tape of it. I find it interesting. I think you will too if this interests you. If it doesn't interest you, I'm glad I saw Rory Duff before. My friend, and I know you've seen this guy before. Cecil. Cecil's my dragon, and he comes and gets me at night and takes me off to a part of the earth we don't see because energetically we're not capable of it yet. Apparently I am when I'm on Cecil. And it's where I go and I see the elementals, the fairies and the elves. And they told me when I was down there in no uncertain terms that all of the stuff that I was hearing, all the stuff I was seeing about what we needed to know was true. And interestingly enough, they took me through. I'm trying to make this as kind of graphic, so I don't have to just listen to my voice. This is the portal, and an artist I don't know, who's a friend of mine, who this is not her art style. She painted this and she said, I think you know someone who's seeing this. And that's the portal I went through with Cecil to get to where the fairies are. And it was real interesting. And so I started studying fairies, dragons, gnomes, elementals of all types. And elementals are a little more like us in that they're tied to our earth. And so I kept saying to everybody, well, I think these ley lines would be interesting if, but where do you find them? You think, oh, they connect cathedrals in England. Well, I'm not going to go back to England next week. So where am I going to find my ley lines? And actually, the earth is covered with a great many of them. If they've been worked with or people have worshipped around them or they've been activated, they've developed more energy. But I kept saying, well, how am I ever going to find a ley line? And then in a casual conversation with an architect who's also part of the psychic world, he mentioned to me that the way to find ley lines is you have to go find a tree with gnarls on it. And I said, "What do you mean gnarls?" And he kept telling me that must be one near me somehow. And there was. This is Hogarth. This tree is in front of my house, and all these little gnarls that you see on there, all the little lumpy bumpy joes, those guys. They call them burls also. Um, those come from him being on a ley line, and there's so much more energy in the ground where there's a ley line than normal that the tree can't use all the energy up adequately, so it creates all those bumps and things to do that. So that's Hogarth, and Hogarth is a thing. Hogarth is out in front of my house, and this is him this spring blooming. When I first found him, it was really cold. It was in the winter, and he was going to sleep. But he talks to me. If I go out and meditate there, I can hear him. And I can tell you, if you find a tree with gnarls and then look around at 360, you're going to find another tree somewhere near, maybe not right on top of it, but somewhat close, that is right in the same area, that because they kind of grow along the ley lines as well. But that's Hogarth. And I talked to him about coming to do the show, and he said, "That's why you've come to know all of us." And so I've been talking to him and talking to him about what you need to know. Now, that's where we're going to get into the stuff from this show, Pam Gregory and Magenta Pixie. And they just did a show. It was about 7 days ago. I only saw it 3 days ago, and I've listened to it several times. And Magenta Pixie talks to the nine, a collective of nine that are extraterrestrial or ETs. And Pam Gregory is an internationally known astrologer in England. And the this gets us to this solstice. What's happened is, while Duff's been off measuring and checking out how wide all the ley lines are, and there's other things called dragon lines, which very famous one in America ends at Holy Hill, which is in Wisconsin. But they go all across the world, and they're all getting bigger and bigger. There's a dragon line that goes across Holland that's 2 miles wide now. Um, and that's enormous compared to where they were even a few years ago. So Duff, Rory Duff kept saying, "We know something's big has happened, and when we meditate on the lines, uh, we feel it." And so, when do you meditate on the lines? How do you know where they are? Well, like I said, they get straight on the solstices and the equinox, but it ends up that they really kind of want us to go out and talk to them at that time, the day before. And Rory kept getting that message when they meditated. You need to go out the day before, and he couldn't figure it out. Well, Magenta Pixie and Pam Gregory were talking about it too, but Rory found a point in the ancient Hebrew texts that say you do it the day before the sun does its thing, and there's a word for it that he said it, I didn't catch it. I'm sorry, but it basically says this is a time to celebrate. This is a time to bring your energy to the energy of the land. And so this is sort of like our ultimate call to get grounded. Magenta Pixie also talked about going to them the day before the solstice. And for those of you who don't know, the summer solstice will be absolutely accurate at 9:56 Central Daylight Time. So you figure it out from there wherever you are. But what Magenta Pixie had picked up was that we all needed to be in place at 3:33 um, in that would be in the afternoon in England. because where they are in the eastern part of England, in Wiltshire, there's going to be some big changes, but the absolute center of the power change in England is going to be somewhere in Scotland, and what she kept seeing was Roslyn, and it sounds like it's going to be at Roslyn, the castle that's tied to the Templars is going to be part of this. And there are people in the world that meet at the equinoxes and at the solstices to sort of say, okay, Earth, we understand you're going through the changes you need to go through. So there, Magenta Pixie was saying that the nine, the collective she speaks with, says we need to be out there at 3:33 British time, which is 9:33 Central Daylight Time. Well, I already have a date on the 21st with Hogarth to go out and meet him. And so now we're going to kind of get out of what other people have told me and what I've gotten from my connections. Right now, we have a marvelous time because humans have been adapting so much more quickly than we had than it had been expected. I mean, I don't know that I expected them to change one way or the other, but you can see it. There's a real feeling of energy in the air, and it's time for us to go out and do our little bit. And you can meet with a group. And if you go to Rory Duff's website, he's got a thing called Sacred Channels, and there are people, there's like 4 or 5 groups that have organized things in Seattle, Washington, and some parks, and in Florida in a park. Boy, does Florida need it. And I don't remember where the other one is. But there are people who meet and they meditate together. Now I'm going to go out and sit and talk to Hogarth. And he's told me, yeah, we're ready for you. Because the fairies and the elemental energies that we put faces on and we create into our own beings, because it's easier for us to understand them, they use the ley lines to travel. And the fact the ley lines are widening and they're sort of hardening, really, says to me that they're moving around a whole lot more than they have been. And that's basically what I was told by them when I meet with their councils and when Cecil comes and picks me up. And I don't have a whole lot of choice in this, guys. I just kind of get to go for the ride. And they're telling me that bigger and bigger energetic changes are happening, not only around us, not only in the ground near us, but in ourselves. And now enough people have shifted, and that this solstice is going to be one of the first ones where we can go claim our power in conjunction with the planet, understand our own heart math, understand our own beginnings, all this stuff that I've been putting together for 2 years. Like, well, I understood because I dealt with rocks that a lot of the stuff really made me feel better. And it made me understand why when I organize crystals a certain way, that was meant to happen. But some of this stuff, every once in a while I go, okay, I'm not going to talk to people about the fact I talk to fairies. And I've learned not to do that because this is a God's truth story. I was talking to a friend of mine who's been having some health problems. And they called me up and said, I had the weirdest nightmare. I wasn't afraid of it. I was just kind of a little upset about it because I woke up and there was a lion on my face and it started breathing on my face. And the first message I got from my guides said, don't leave me alone much. They said that it would be that they would be breathing life to this person. They were helping them get better. So I said that to him. They said, well, that's fine because they sent it in something slightly less frightening than a giant house cat. And I mean, giant, she said it looked like a lion. So, um, she and I talked about cats and critters and stuff because we're both pet owners. And then I said, well, you feeling okay? She said, yeah, she's feeling fine. So we hung up. And I walked in my kitchen where I have one of those family hub Google screens. And, you always have to say a certain combination of words, which I am not going to say right now, because if I do, it will go off and then you can all get to hear it. Um, but it said, I went in and I looked at the screen, but you have to tell it, I want thus and so recipe, or can you tell me about this topic or whatever. And I hadn't done any of that when I'd left earlier after dinner. It was just set up in its usual time and temperature settings. I walk into my kitchen and it has a big screen on there all about cats. And I'm like, who did that? Because I hadn't said the magic combination of words. And then even if you do that, it asks you if you really want to go to that screen. So I was like, okay. And then I was talking with another friend in the early evening, and I was sitting in the front room and my office is in the back. And I could hear some lilting women's voices. That's what they sounded like. But they weren't clear enough for me to hear it. So I ran back to see if my computer was on, and it wasn't. Everything was turned off. So I went back and finished my conversation with my friends. But when I came back, I found some of my cards and some of my crystals had been moved around on my desk. So I asked Hogarth, next time we had a conversation, I said, are the fairies visiting me? He said, oh yeah, the fairies, the elves, there's several of them. They're coming by just to keep you in the loop and let you know you're supposed to be paying attention to them. Well, it was when I was sick, so I wasn't paying attention to much of anything. But trust me, I'm paying more attention to them now. And then literally between images I was seeing that were all shifting and changing, and what I was seeing in the earth around me, and then finding out that people from disparate places, like Nova Scotia's, where Anne Perry wrote out the numerology thing about the 7 year, which is, time to go inside, clean out, get rid of the stuff you don't need, pull in the things you do need, and move forward. It's just now time. We got our marching orders. And that doesn't, in my case, moving forward doesn't mean I'm going much of anywhere. I'm still sitting around here doing what I do. But it means energetically moving forward. And that I have had the honor of living long enough to be in a period of time where I'm being upgraded. Now, to some of the youngins, that's like, so what? But trust me, I remember in my 30s, it seemed like the world was spinning its wheels and going absolutely nowhere. Now time seems to move so quickly. And it's for older people, it's for younger people. I'm sure for kids, well, kids, I don't know, kids live in their own time zone, but kids, like under 13. But anyway, it's a time of incredible change. And I wanted to let you know that I'm going to be out talking with Hogarth at 9:33 in the morning on Tuesday, just to see what's going on out there. I will warn you this about ley line energy. I work with a lot of energetic rocks. I work with a lot of energy, period. When I first started going out to visit him and go along the ley lines, I could only stay on them for a couple of minutes and I had to get off. The energy is that intense, and I'm pretty sensitive to that, but it's that intense. Now, okay, so now we know what I'm going to do on the 21st. What are you going to do on the 21st? What are you going to do to honor this time of change, to acknowledge that the earth is upgrading itself faster than we can keep up with, and to understand what fun this can be? And, you can meet in groups that are even if the interconnectivity is on the is on the web, on Zoom or on StreamYard or whatever you use. If you have a couple people you can get together with and talk with at that time, it's going to be a very important message for you. Um, if you want to do it on your own, just come up with your own little ritual. Uh, Magenta Pixie suggested that she had channeled in amethyst as a very important stone to have around you. That doesn't mean go buy the most. Trust me, you can find some really expensive amethyst. If you've got a little chip of it, carry it with you during that time, and it will help tie you to the vibrations of the earth better. But remember, this is a time when we're breaking down so we can recreate, so we can move forward. So what I'm going to do is show you, because there were not that many people when I showed this the first time. We've got a lot more people in the chat now. This is a reading I did about what are we discussing today. And this, I did the deck I'm using, for those of you who care about those things, is the Fae Tarot. And this is a Ace of Cups. And in this deck in particular, it means to be filled with happiness and light. Those are little fairy creatures flying around, going into the Ace of Cups, filling it up. These three cards are what's really going on around us. Then what's caught in the middle? The devil. The devil is just our ego. The devil is just the stuff we want to hold on to because we think it keeps us more grounded, when actually it doesn't. And even his tail's on fire. This guy's not going anywhere. He's eating trees, and that's, don't eat Hogarth. Leave Hogarth alone. Anyway, and I suppose if you're from Canada, the devil today makes a lot of sense to you. He's on fire and he's eating trees. I cannot imagine the amount of devastation. I've seen small forest fires. I can't even imagine what's happened up around you. But that's all part of the transformation, the letting go and having things change. Because our out card is the 10 of Swords. And I realize there aren't 10 swords in there, but it is. And what happens is when the 10 of Swords reaches the end of its life as a card, everything is gone. Everything is dissipated. If you look at, he's melting, or he's kind of burning up from the bottom. So there's going to be a lot of letting go. And then when I thought about that and some of what I'd read, I was like, but what's going to be there? And all I got was trust. Trust us. We'll get you where you need to go. But it's a time for us to trust and to challenge ourselves to live in this now. So go into this solstice saying, acknowledging that we all have stuff we can shed. We all have stuff we need to let go of. Lord knows there's a lot of junk behind me I could let go of one way or another. But it's not just that kind of junk. It's the emotional junk. It's the leftover stuff. Because we're going into a new age. And why would you want to drag that in with you? And that includes people. I've talked to so many of the readings I've done, the 6-month readings to the end of the year, where people are casting off a lot of stuff. Oh, I didn't think I could make that change now. Well, oops, maybe I can. And I really want to encourage everybody, because I really have great hope about the energies that are going on around us right now and how we can all change and grow from it. And I'm not doing the most exciting presentations, so I would suggest you go view the shows where they go into much more detail about how their point of view on seeing this is. And I find that a lot of this stuff that's going on around us, it's really very, very, very hopeful. And we have been through such a dark time where I guess, you can't see the light nearly as well until you have the dark defined. We've had it very well defined, thank you. We don't need any more dark. And let's see. Oh, this is nice. I think I remember this. Her first day of work is going to be 6:20. So she is starting on a whole new adventure, exactly on time and in queue with the universe. And let's see. The it can be as loud as you want. I have ringing in my ears constantly, Rose, and it's an artifact from surgery. So, but they can still talk to me because it's not words like has to cut through that kind of sound. It's words that live on the other level. Well, you go, girl. Go to that ley line. And, if you open your mind up, is a ley line here? They'll tell you. I mean, of course, me, I had to wait till everything died in the winter and a bright yellow stripe developed in the middle of the lawn. And I went out and I went, oh, is that a ley line? It's awfully straight. It's running right through that tree, going right up to the next tree that yellow stuff touched has some burls on it. I'm a little slow sometime on the uptake, but um, okay. Skywalking with Moon. I saw I saw a male fairy riding on a small horse instead of a vegetable. He was all by himself. He looks like a skinny gnome, but he was dressed like him. Is it a gnome or fairy or something else? It really depends where you are. In Ireland, they have like 15 different words for fairy, but if you go to the depths of what's going on, they're all fairies. I mean, they're all wee folk, little people, and what else? Okay, I'm checking. I'm not seeing. You're listening and typing to each other, but at least listening. That's so wonderful. Yeah, now this is the kind of darkness that we can do without. Trump and the gang. I mean, if you, Helene, I agree. I mean, but after he was indicted, I just went in and I turned on MSNBC, but I worked on something else while I was watching it. And I'll tell you, there are signs of hope. I know we don't get them often. And I'm going into politics, so if you hate that, turn it off. Um, Tuesday night, when everybody was doing their big recaps of what happened in the hearing, MSNBC was the highest rated cable channel. Beat out CNN, it beat out Fox, it beat out everybody. And I have some friends in politics are going into the demographics of it, and it looks like the independents are listening, or at least they're trying to find out. And that's part of the Great Awakening. You don't have to listen to Nancy Jean. You don't have to deal with the crystal. You don't have to do anything. But if you're in this kind of energetic change, you're in this kind of energetic change. And it's going to happen around you, even if you don't feel it, even if you're not actively seeking it out. It will find you. I mean, little cosmic atomic particles don't go, oh no, that person has a red hat on. I'm not going through them. They go through everybody's head. Red hats, not. Open to things, not. Touching crystals, or not. I'm so excited that, especially this image is coming up. Oh, I'm going to get rid of Lane. Okay. Because people ask me when I work with the crystals, do I think they're alive? Yes, I think they're the oldest form of life on the earth because they contain energy just like we do. Theirs just leaks out much more slowly than ours does. But some of them are very active, and if you put them in the right environment, they're very smooth and you can feel the interconnection. You put them together in the wrong environment, where you put together an activating crystal right next to a crystal that's going to calm you down, you're going to have a little bit of conflict there. So you have to think about your crystals that way too. I I've done some shows on Crystal Chaos. I really need to do another one. It's a fun show, and I enjoy it. And I I'm gonna go to the very bottom of the screen. If someone has a question that they want to ask now, somebody just type. This is funny. I'm gonna get my Advil. Good. Okay. So um, I'm going to stop now because I'm saying far too much, which means I'm really have to dig into the back of my brain. But just remember, okay, um, yeah, I know, Rose. He can't shut up yelling. Okay. A lot of the energy beings are activated during natural disaster. When the ground moves, the elementals are part of the ground and they move too. And so theoretically, with Jupiter in Taurus, we should have a lot more earthquakes, volcanoes blowing up, a lot more of that kind of stuff. Uh, they when those things happen, they blow off humans like we're fleas. If you've ever seen, there's a YouTube video out there called the worst years in the history of the world, and it's like 536, and it's a time when I think Krakatoa blew up, and it covered the world with ash, and people starved all over the world, and it remade empires. It remade the face of Europe. It remade the face of Egypt. Egypt was at that point it was at the beginnings of failing empire, but it really crashed it down. And that's in the Egyptian tombs when they write about that period of time. They talk about cannibalism and stuff. It was grim. It was grim. Um, but I don't know what. I have no idea what set that off. I know that if you watch Heather Ensworth, she'll talk about that. She talks about some grand cycle that takes 24,000 years. And we're in the middle of the transition from one of those to the other. The beginning of the patriarchy, um, um, she was, that's when she talks about that, and that's fading away. And what we're seeing, the Me Too movement, all this stuff, that was the ending of the patriarchy. That was the end of the boys will be boys, no girls allowed. And couldn't be happier to see anything go in my life, let me tell you, because I lived through the nightmare worst of it, except I didn't put up with their BS much. I also didn't rise in the corporate ranks. Let's see. Oh, yes. The other one is if you can, uh, she talks about the journey of Sedna. Sedna is a constellation. It's actually a planet now. That's one of the little planets that's visiting the Earth right now. And she got lied to by her. This is the quickest that you're ever going to hear the Sedna legend. She got lied to by a husband, got taken off by him. So somehow the gods came and told her dad. This is an Alaskan legend. That he needed to go get her, so he went to get her in his little canoe and bring her back to her tribe. And it ends up the guy she'd married had been a wizard, and so he started making the sea swell up and all this stuff. And Sedna, so the wizard told Sedna's father, "You have to throw her overboard because if she doesn't behave for me, she's not going back to the village." So her dad threw her out of the boat. This is up in very cold Alaskan waters, tossed her out of the boat. She grabbed onto the boat, screaming for him to save her. And he ended up cutting her fingers off so she couldn't hold on to the boat. And so the end of the legend is her sinking into the sea and parts of her becoming some of the more magnificent sea creatures that are in the ocean. And eventually the gods scooped her up and made her a planet. And anyway, it's a really grim legend, but it's pretty much true at times. And okay, now we got an update on Sedna, and this has nothing to do with what I was talking about. Wait. Sedna is leaving Taurus, moving to Gemini. She's a very slow moving planet, by the way. It is sad, but if we can get to a place, because before the patriarchy, we had a matriarchy, and that could be just as things not being balanced is not a good thing. And yeah, this is Rory Duff with Heather Ensworth on the changing of the ley lines. For those of you who are quick enough to catch that. And this is Pam Gregory and Magenta Pixie. And I'd say watch both of them. They fascinated me. And they kind of ended up, okay, that fits with this piece I know from this part of the world. And that fits from this piece that I know from this part of the world. So we have had too much chaos. And the thing is that each of us is responsible for getting our own little piece of the pie cleared up and even. And I hope you all will work on that. And because we've got a lot more heavy duty changes coming. And I did a show with Danny 2 years ago in the fall, but it was right after the 8/8 Lionsgate that both Danny and I at the same time had the same vision. And we saw that we were like on a road with all the people were on one road, and then there was a split in the road. And the message both of us got was it was time to let go of baggage you didn't need, to travel as light as possible, because time was going to be moving so quickly it would exhaust us. And so okay, Sharon's site, Pam Gregory's link didn't work. Then go to Pam Gregory and look Magenta Pixie up, because she's one of the last shows she did. And as the road splits and it gets farther and farther, Danny and I saw there may be a time when you can go back and grab some people back, but there's going to come a time when you're going to realize that's not possible. And I've heard more of that in the last 3 months from people, that family members they hope they could win back or get together with or whatever, they're walking away from it. And just saying, I'm here, I believe in what I believe in, and I have to be who I am. And in some ways we have to get the universe we want, to get the planet we want. And I really want to see the planet happy. I mean, I don't know, supposedly stuff happens between now and 2024, and then 2026 is another time. And I'm watching all of the things coming up. But I just want to give you all a heads up, because this summer solstice and the positivity of it is showing up early. So let's go for something early that's positive. Yay! And I'll have a show probably a week from yesterday, on that Thursday. And I'll have a show on point. Okay. Are those not? Well, here we go about Nancy not paying much attention to advanced geography. I thought those were Alaskans. They're Canadians too, I know. It's all that. It's places that are far colder than any place I want to live. And I'll put up with a lot of crap to stay hot because I live in Texas, right? I'd like you, if you can, you know how to reach me. This is my email and my website, but it's my emails, crystaldirections.nancyjean@gmail.com. If you'll kind of report in if anything happens. And I mean, you can also report in nothing. I've asked people that question before, and they wrote back very bravely and said, I don't think anything happened, but then I wasn't trying. So, and thank you, Sharon, for being such a good cheerleader in the thing. And thanks for Dr. Gale and Ola Painter and Dina Donatelli and Tammy, who shows up all the time. And I'm going to take you up. I'm going to do another show, Kayenta, about crystal interactions, because I don't think we talk about it enough. Of course, I never think people talk about crystals enough. Anyway, that's 1 hour. I'm going away, kids. Bye.